China EVs and more, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I'm the managing director at NIO Auto Insights, a management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. On a lovely autumn day, good afternoon, Lei. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon from my side. I am your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. And this is episode number 91. It's technically...
Creeping up.
It's technically Singles Day, China time. So how's that shopping cart going?
Shri.
My wife already is done with her shopping, so...
Oh, man. I used to buy more things at JD than my wife bought stuff at Alibaba. So,
anyways, we're going to go backwards in our topics. So starting off with NIO, which just had their Q3 earnings. What can I say? A lot of details shared by William in the earnings call.
Right.
Very juicy details, I think.
Very informative too. Like actually useful information.
Yeah, and I think we've all been looking to that boom moment, and it seems that we're almost there. But right, but at least the Q4 guidance was
very positive.
Yeah, very positive. So I think the general financially was that their revenues beat expectations, but still losing a lot of money. But the deliveries guidance was pretty upbeat. And especially William saying that they're going to try to do a 20,000 run rate in December. So that's a big step up, I think.
What we should make sure everyone understands is that they shouldn't fall for the sizzle of 4 products launching in Europe. By the end of this year, there will probably be only a few hundred deliveries in Europe, whereas the bulk of the attention should be paid to November and December, where, like Leia just mentioned, they are hoping to get to 20,000, a 20,000 unit run rate, which would be quite significant if you look at their volumes over the last several months. So again, exciting news that they've launched in Europe, but that share price is probably going to be more affected by those significant increases in deliveries in China. So
yeah, well, good thing the share price is going up today.
Positive news. So,
yeah, they've been stagnant. Let's just say that. And if we look back to the Q2 earnings, when they had the Q3 guidance was 31,000 to 33,000, and they reached pretty much the lower side of the guidance with just over 31,000 in Q3. And now with October done, meaning they'll have about, 35,000-ish over the last 2 months. So I don't expect deliveries to be over 20,000 this year. Probably will get to 15,000 should be no problem. 18,000 even possibly. But with a production run rate of 20,000, you would expect the delivery numbers to be somewhere a little bit lower.
And you're throwing these numbers out, pretty confidently, and I agree with you, but we all should point back to the challenges that NIO has had itself operationally, and then look at the external market, because things are still locked down. I mean, there are still lockdowns happening in China, in Beijing, and in Shanghai. So don't be surprised if there's any interruption in production in the next 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah. And we just heard officially the Beijing Auto Show. I mean, that it was never going to happen, right?
Never.
At least the official statement that it was not going to be held. And the Guangzhou Auto Show being delayed, possibly still being held in mid-December, but we don't know. But it was interesting to hear William mention BYD in the earnings call.
Right.
Because, as you said, NIO has his own problems, but BYD is chugging along. And so that shows a kind of a contrast. And then pertaining to NIO specifically, I think he mentioned several factors. One is the subframe that has some issues that affected several thousand units of production. And then COVID was, I think they were shut down for almost a week.
I heard 7,000 units of lost production in October.
So depending on how you look at it, I think 50,000, pessimistically, it wasn't as high as expected, but optimistically, it's actually pretty good considering the current environment.
And where NIO should have a lot more good news relative to its US traded counterparts, Li Auto and XPeng, is that they have 3 vehicles that have launched within the last 4 months. And so that momentum should follow them into 2023, whereas XPeng and Li Auto, it could be pretty challenging, specifically for XPeng, just because the G9 is the single thoroughbred that XPeng has relative to its much, much older siblings, the G3, P5, and P7.
And William also mentioned about their R&D investment being $3 billion per quarter on a consistent basis. So going forward, this is something to watch at NIO, is their vertical integration kind of extension, since he did mention BYD,
right?
Meaning their AD chip R&D, already 500 people, their battery business. Okay, there's just going to be a lot going on that part. And then 2 brands. He mentioned 2 brands, including the mass brand. And basically, he said, without the vertical integration, you're not going to get to that 20% gross margin for the mass brand.
No one will.
Again, citing BYD, yeah.
Because that services revenue for any real automaker is 7-8 years out at least, right? So significant services revenue.
And he did mention about the, somebody asked about the city NGP type of ADAS, and he was like, it's going to be another 1 to 2 years for that to even contribute any significant meanings to the margins. And also, it's pretty much what XPeng is facing, legislation and tech, right? So, and the other very interesting number that he gave out was every 100,000 RMB in lithium carbonate prices equates to 2 points in margins. That was interesting.
See, so it hits the bottom line. Yeah. So it's not blended into a revenue.
Right now, it's 600,000 RMB per ton or $80,000, and they're budgeting at 400,000 RMB for 2023. So that kind of, but he was really confident in saying, without these disruptions, easy 25% or 30% for the NIO brand at least. Should be easy to reach. But I don't.
You know what, Lei? If my aunt was a man, he'd be my uncle. So if there wasn't a thunderstorm, I'd be dry. So
it's also like listening to him saying, the beating 3 series and getting to 30,000 a month for a single model. That's not what I'm looking for. Well, obviously, what the heck? I'm sure he'd be happy but again, that shows that this boom or hump that we're talking about during 10,000 a month versus they're going to have 150,000 per plant, single shift. So 300,000. Getting to that level is a lot harder, right? I think.
And we're seeing this in the United States as well with Rivian and Lucid, because Rivian is adding a second shift, and they said that they're only building a few thousand cars a month. So, a
quarter.
Yeah, and exactly. Sorry, quarter. And so it is really, really, really challenging for them, full stop. And then on top of that, chip supply chain issues, pricing issues. And I think one of the reasons William had articulated all these things is because he wants everyone to know that, hey man, NIO's business is pretty complicated. So we're doing the best we can. it's not like they're sitting around doing nothing, right? And so I think it was kind of an emphasis on, hey, we're doing the best we can, and we should see fruits from our labor in December, right?
Yes, that's the sense that I got.
Not only that, but the one aside was that NIO is also going to be working with Farizon, right? So they have an internal team designing ASICs.
Right. That was announced by the Farizon CEO for the mass brand. Yeah.
And so someone asked me about that, and my take on that, and you poke holes in it, Lei, is that Farizon made the announcement because they want other domestic EV makers to know that they're open for business. Just because Volkswagen has 40, 50, I think it's 40% ownership, that does not mean that we are exclusive to Volkswagen, and we will share the most technologically advanced products we have with external customers as much as we will share it with Volkswagen. So
yeah, and so he mentioned 5 new models by the first half of next year. I don't think there are going to be any all new models. Probably iterations of
like derivatives.
Existing, could be like a EC7, those type of
decontented.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they announce at the NIO Day in about a month. Probably quite a few of those cars will be presented.
It helps with pricing differentiation a little bit, and hopefully expands their volume a bit, right? Because you would hope that they studied and learned their lesson from Li Auto and effectively cannibalizing the Li 1 months before it was ready to be end of life. So
the L8 just started deliveries today. That was another news from competition, and and also NIO doesn't have plans for MPV anytime soon. So that's
there's some controversy on Twitter about that, right? So
so
that's what you get for starting rumors, dude.
yeah.
So.
But, I mean, I think a lot of questions were surrounding the ET5 because there was, and William kind of said, Tesla dropping prices, it's not going to affect too much. We're not in the same price band and all that. So that's,
Oh, but he's being modest because the ET5 is definitely targeting Model 3, right? So
Model 3, 3 Series, all of that. So, so we should at least see 10,000 5-digit every month from now on. That's the guidance. Anything less would be really surprising.
Especially from the backdrop of 6 million, 500,000 cars a month from the Chinese market, right?
Yeah.
Because if they're still at 10, 12, 14,000 units and we're at 6.5 million annual run rate for NEV sold in China, they're actually losing share. They're losing market, right? So we have to also be cognizant of that.
So this year they're going to get to, if they get the, let's say 50,000 in Q4, they're going to get to over 130,000. Now let's conservatively predict that they can double this in 2023, which is 260,000. And that's, if they can maintain that 20,000 run rate a month, it's doable. It's very possible.
I feel that it is completely in their control because of these operational challenges that they have, right?
Look at what happened to XPeng. I think their internal target for 2022 was well over 200,000.
Yeah.
And where are they now? So, but theoretically, without these disruptions, the trend is pointing to that direction that doubling over this year should not be a problem based on demand. So
William Li is completely bullish on his product lineup. What he is,
he's the CEO.
what he's cautious about is operationally whether they can put everything together, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's not one thing, it's another. production-wise, they're humming along, and then all of a sudden COVID comes and shuts down their factory. So there's these mitigating factors, but there's also a lot that they still control. And you and I feel pretty bullish about their product portfolio. There's a few, the ES6, the ES8, that do need some refreshes, right? Because if you're 18 months or longer in the market without a fairly significant software update that changes or adds features, you're probably not getting a lot of foot traffic in your retail stores. We're seeing that with Xpeng. G9 is not enough to lift the other products, the other older products in their portfolio. With Li Auto, they just don't have that many to begin with. And so how they will, the L8 and the L9 will complement each other from a sales standpoint. You know, you would think the L8 would be the high runner and the L9 would be the flagship. So, you know, maybe there's a 1.5 to 1 ratio of L8 sales to L9 sales. So we'll see. It's going to be an interesting 2023 as we finally figure out if the Chinese government is going to pull those COVID incentives away, which people are fearing and predicting, right?
Yeah. So in summary, the general picture seems to be rosy based on the earnings call and William's comments. Now it's just a matter of really getting over that hump, as we say, whether they can do it. If they can do it, then we're really looking at everybody needs to be in a good rhythm. One like BYD.
The machine. Nobody, BYD, the machine.
Nobody, yeah. I heard they're planning to for 280,000 sales in December. Yeah.
So shameless play. I was interviewed by Russell Flannery for Forbes, who is one of the senior auto reporters for Forbes. He did an interview with Wang Chuanfu, and so I helped him with some background. So if you're interested, anyone that's interested in BYD, they need to read Russell's article that posted 2 days ago or yesterday. So it's a good background, and effectively he said, you know, talk less and do more, right? So.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So it's good to see our CEM friends over in BYD.
Yeah, that was
tour and test drive. Yeah.
They went from not having a PR team to basically having a bunch of KOLs be their PR team, right? So
yeah, exactly. So and us too.
Yeah, well, you know, we'll get a chance, I'm sure. So
yeah, we already have. So thanks to Snowball.
Yes. What's next?
EX90, Geely, the whole Geely week, basically.
Yes. Okay. Maybe you can summarize for us, bullet point, what Geely week, what entailed of Geely week. So
on Monday was the Farizon. I don't know how to pronounce it. Farizon. Yeah. Auto launching a super van and a home truck cabless event. And then on Tuesday was the Geely Renault tie-up on the powertrain.
Yes, on the IC side, on the IC side.
Yeah, and then on Wednesday was the Volvo EX90 reveal. And then the RD6 pickup launched.
Camper or whatever.
Yeah, camper. Yeah. I feel like it's a no-frills truck or pickup.
It's cheap, relatively,
it's cheap.
Right?
It's not, right. Yeah,
so it's not some premium, and you know, I have a ton of respect for Ash, but when he's talking about Geely cars, I have to take that with a grain of salt, right? So,
yeah. And the other news was also related was Volvo divesting in this Orbe powertrain joint venture, and basically, I think that's going to clear the way for that joint venture to be absorbed into the Geely Renault entity, I believe.
Yeah. Right.
Because they're really basically doing the same thing. They're just going to pull everything together. And that's a huge entity based on the global footprint.
That is going to eventually get wound down, right? Because it's ICE and hybrid.
Yeah.
So,
and then really not China related, but the Renault side, it felt like they did their capital markets. It felt like one company is going into, 4 or 5 different companies?
Yeah.
right? So the EV business, there's the Ampere, which is basically the carrier of Renault, right?
Which is going to rely a lot on Nissan IP that they haven't agreed to share yet.
Right.
And this should be noted because Nissan doesn't want Renault to share that with Geely.
Yeah, I think these are still being debated and discussed in the background to sort things out.
Yes, it is. And we should also note that Renault, Luca De Meo, leaned into their relationship with Google. It's been a standing
Qualcomm.
relationship since 2018. And Luca De Meo said that they're going to really rely on Google to help them come up with revenue generating services. So again, I have a post in this week's newsletter that, I'm pretty cynical about these legacies inviting the fox into the hen house. So I just don't know. Let me ask you this, Lei. If you're Luca De Meo, do you believe that eventually Renault via Ampere will build out its own ecosystem, digital ecosystem that will substitute it out for Google's? Or how do you think he's thinking about that?
I think based on what these legacies have announced and based on what Volvo, they just did their capital markets day today following the EX90 launch. And I get the sense is that, Stellantis, Renault, even Mercedes, all of these legacies, they're going to go to the root of control some things on their own while opening that bridge, I quote, to others. That's what I'm getting. It's not going to completely closed or depending on others.
I know it's a necessary evil because they can't create and digitize themselves in the period of time they need to. I get that. But it's almost a damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's a dangerous and risky move because if I'm an Android user and I buy a Renault, then I can completely bypass any type of Renault ecosystem. And although Renault will get a share of that revenue via their Ampere vehicle that is using Google as the digital platform, remember that Google has partnered with other automakers. So the data that they're collecting and sharing is going to be added with Google's other legacy partners, and it's going to be much more powerful that way. And we already know the technology companies, whether you're Chinese or American, they're much, much better at gathering the data, analyzing the data, coming up with new businesses for that data, and then generating and monetizing that data. The legacies have no idea. And let's make a full stop on that. They have no idea how to monetize the services, right? So the one irony that I thought was kind of a head scratcher was Luca had emphasized that we're going to have vehicles that act like mobile phones. And he highlighted an over-the-air experience, right? Where it's like in real time, we're going to update software. And I'm like, that is not a feature. That should be a qualifier that most EV companies in China can do it. Tesla can do it.
Yeah.
So why are you emphasizing that? So I digress. But
it's going to take them some time, right, to come to fruition anyways.
And we have to also emphasize that how it's going to play out in Europe due to the data privacy and security laws being very different from the US and China. Maybe that allows them to really, really maintain ownership of those new services, those new businesses. Because one thing that another article that I'm posting in my newsletter is that the European Commission is pretty upset. All 27 countries, the finance ministers are upset about the Inflation Reduction Act. And they think it's unfair and it unlevels the playing field. I don't know what that means, because it's not articulated in detail. But so there's definitely going to be pushback on the US side and then on the China side if you're the European Union. So interesting to see how that'll play out as more and more Chinese EV companies enter Europe and the number of vehicles imported into Europe from China increases significantly. Okay.
Yeah. And speaking of it, Geely's in the loop again. They're launching the geometry models into some European countries, right? So that's the other.
And you saw that on Monday. I'd written that because of that Farizon announcement. I tweeted and listed all those brands, right?
Yes. And Missing Smart and many others probably.
Well, yeah, I ran out of characters. So
and that Farizon or whatever. It's also a global play. The Superman. You know, that's a huge segment in Europe.
And it's more short haul than long haul, but it is encroaching on a too simple space, right? Because in China, too simple was more short haul than long haul trucking.
Yeah.
And in the United States, they're more long haul. So
also playing into that business, the G Space, the Geely's satellite business. It's also interesting. Geely and NIO, they're both building smartphones. That's
yes,
right.
And didn't NIO say they're building watches? I think they did.
I don't remember.
So
maybe they do.
Dude, I have to ask you though, like EX90, Polestar 3, $10,000 difference. I could not really find out what the distinction of features between the two vehicles are. So
I think the difference being one is a lot more performance based.
Okay.
And the other is really, the kind of the Volvo brand safety focused.
Sure.
Traditional, starting if we talk about the XC90 is the first vehicle that had that new design language that kind of, when we talk about Volvo, we immediately think about the XC90, I think. So whereas Polestar, it's pretty new, and that's why I think from the press conference, the event just felt more down to earth for some reason, more likable for
less cold.
EX90, and it might be cheesy, but I probably would be in the market for EX90. Although both you have to wait till 2024. So
yeah, pretty.
Yeah.
And one thing I didn't hear is, will they be building that EX90 in South Carolina as well?
Yes, first in the U.S. and then later on in China.
Right, that's right. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. So I think I think that seems to me is placing importance on the North American market first, probably as far as production, is concerned.
But that goes back to the European Union having those concerns, right?
Sure.
So Volvo's going to have those same concerns about getting shut out of the subsidy stuff, right?
Yeah, and Hyundai Kia, the plant in Georgia was sped up, right, because of it. And but they're on their way, right? So one new model every year in the next few years, and that teaser of that much smaller
EX60 or 40.
I think it might be closer to EX40 because it looked a lot smaller than the 90. So
I believe so too, because you have a flagship and you need a high runner, because that flagship might sell 10, 12,000 units, $100,000 in the United States. I don't know, maybe 10,000, 12,000 units for the year, at least the first year. So, and we have to remember that this is an electric vehicle. So it's not like, okay, same production process. They're going to be on a learning experience as well. So it's going to be a slow ramp initially to make sure that the pipeline, the supply pipeline for battery cells, for the chassis and all that stuff is all filled before they can really, really ramp. So
1.2 million 2025, half of those are BEVs. So you do your math, right? How much they can get with the models. And then just quickly on the October EV sales, right? All the numbers have come out. One set of numbers I thought it was interesting was the CPCA numbers by price range in October. Below 100,000 RMB, 28%. 100,000 to 200,000, 46%. And 200,000 to 300,000, 19%.
So for the listeners, 100,000 RMB is about 17,000 US dollars, 16,000 US dollars. Okay.
Yeah. So you add these percentage up, I get 95% of the market is below the EV market, NEV market is below maybe 300,000.
Yes.
And roughly 75% below 200,000 RMB. So that kind of gives you an indication of where the market is. So that's one. And then the penetration-wise, the Chinese brands, they're roughly 50%, 10x more than the mass JV brands, which are at 5%. That's another indication of the volume by these different segments. And then it's a foregone conclusion, man. I'm saying 6.5, 6. I'm saying 6.8, but that's obviously including. This is another very interesting data. January to October, more than 500,000 EVs were exported. So that's included in the sales numbers. So a little bit of grain of salt.
Right.
But still, you add everything together, I said, 6.8 million total, 25% of the market are NEVs. That's the foregone conclusion.
Right.
And I put 2 question marks on next year, and I'm going to answer them. Whether we'll get to 10 million and whether BYD will get to 4 million. So my answer is resounding yes. And the reason being,
to both.
EVs are becoming Vs. I'm taking a page out of your yeah. That's the only reason. EVs are becoming Vs.
Yes.
We're way past on talking about. Despite I think there's a lot of news that are concerning about 2023, but I have every reason to believe that we can get to 10 million. 100% growth? No, that's not going to happen.
And this is if there is a recession, Lei, or if, because a lot of people are saying that NEV sales for 2023 in China specifically are going to slow fairly significantly. So
relatively, is 50% growth is slower than 100% growth? Yes.
Okay.
Right?
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. So, but still, I think the volume is going to be there.
And that makes that year-end take rate. If we're at 25 million, that's going to be about 30-something%, right? So, much higher than the 25 that they were targeting by 2025. So
yeah, 20% is the official target for 2025.
Yes. And if we can rewind a second, Lei, this over 90% of NEVs sold in China were less than 300,000. Yeah, in October, less than 300,000 RMB. That would scare the crap out of me if I was a European automaker selling EVs in Europe, because most of these legacy automakers in Europe are launching higher end vehicles. And so and remember, this is in the backdrop of 2035, the European Union eliminating the sale of ICEs and diesel fueled vehicles. Okay. So the take rate needs to increase significantly over the next several years. And I don't think the legacy automakers in Europe have the products to fill that void. Right.
I think that's this time window where we're seeing this huge export volumes out of China.
Yes.
And it's not only to Europe, right? I think Mexico, Chile were some of
Southeast Asia.
That might include ICE as well, but still, I think the its availability and And as you see, right, 39,000 euro U6 from iWays, right?
Yeah.
That's not expensive, right?
You know, the Europeans cannot say they were blindsided or surprised because Tavares already turned on the alarm bell, right? So he knows that they will come if you allow them to. So
Yeah.
but this puts European consumer in a precarious position because if there are no viable multiple products that I can choose from at the lower price segments, and I have to buy either a Renault Zoe or an ID3 or an ID4 or whatever.
Dacia Spring, right? Those type of vehicles made in China.
Yeah, it doesn't give me a ton of options, right? And so
yeah, I think speaking of that car, I think EGT, which is made by EGT, I think in October they exported like 13,000 units. So behind Tesla and SAIC probably,
right
in terms of export volume. Yeah. So yeah, and then the other topic I listed was CIIE.
Yes,
I think it's. I mean, to us, it's obviously more than automotive, but to us, it was like an auto show, right? Because considering everything was either canceled or ended early, prematurely, it felt like an auto show, and I think it was kind of a respite for these foreign automakers to be there because there were no Chinese brands exhibiting. So right, although it was more diplomatic, and still, I think it was some interesting reveals. For example, the Celestique actually made the China debut at the Grand Guild. Right, with the Hummer EV, they're doing a lot of media test drives. With
a Corvette
EV.
was there, right?
Yeah, and Celestique, that's going to be a few million renminbi, personalized. Every order will be different. Will be a different car.
It will be bespoke.
Type of thing. Yeah, bespoke. Yeah, and then some other brands. Let's say Honda launched is a global debut of their next.
Yep.
The EN2 concept. So that's their next EVs coming up. Toyota presented the BZ4X and BZ3. Ford had the F-150 Lightning.
Yeah.
Tesla obviously made, again, big news with the Bot and the Plaid, right? And then dropping the insurance again.
Yep.
So all of those things happening. And
speaking of...
And Hyundai actually, they had... a different event unrelated to the CIIE, but I thought it was interesting that they're trying to get back on top. I think Beijing Hyundai announced a new strategy to, get back to how many, whatever sales. And yeah.
The only thing I think about when I think of Hyundai is cheap cars and taxis. Because when I moved to Beijing in 2009, every taxi I got into was a Hyundai. So,
yeah, I'd say Hyundai and Kia, their brand image have been really diluted in the past, however, number of years, and being a multiple Hyundai owner, both in China and the U.S., I feel it's completely. I mean, how Hyundai and Kia here in the U.S. that feel right, that the brand image is totally different.
Kia is everywhere here in the US.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. And they are the second most popular EV in the United States, I believe. So
second or third, yeah.
Yeah, they're doing very well, very well. And speaking of Tesla, share price down to under $250. There was an article that said that they were sitting on about 16,000 units of inventory at the end of October, which is the largest inventory they've sat on ever since the opening of Shanghai Gigafactory. So I think that's fairly significant because they can't hide it anymore. They can't ship it to Europe. And so
look for Teslas to reduce prices again next year. I'm just going to say it here because they still have room to do so.
Unless
they still have their card to play.
Unless they come out and surprise us with a refresh or something, I agree with you. Because they just don't have any new product.
But they will. It's just a matter of timing, I think.
Well, what I meant is like 2023. I don't think there's just going to be anything.
The only other thing I think relates to what we're talking on a daily and weekly basis is the LiDAR space. There was some interesting news with the
Luminar,
Ulster and Velodyne combining.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then RoboSense and Husai, the last few days respectively, launched their flash solid-state LiDARs for blind spot monitoring. That was an interesting play. And so I think we're seeing this LiDAR space being consolidated right in front of our eyes.
And there's likely similar things going on the other sensor stacks, but because LiDAR is so visual, I think it's easy to kind of key in on, right?
Yeah, and right, and again, going back to the EX90 and the Polestar 3, we're seeing that bump.
Yes,
from on the top from Luminar, right?
You know, people were saying, "Oh, Volvo's bump is similar to NIO's." I don't know how you design that much differently, right? So
that's. But I'm just saying that we're seeing that happening outside of China now.
Yes, right? Exactly. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.